Okay, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. My name is Aziza Akmouche. I'm heading the division that works on cities, urban policy and sustainable development at the OECD. And it's my pleasure to be your master of ceremony for the coming hour and a half to launch this report that is a joint exercise with UN Habitat and Cities Alliance on global state of national urban policy. We are having a few more participants join. Very good. Just to give the background that we are recording today's session, that it will be available on the OECD webpage in a day or two, to invite you all to be active using the chat, to say hi and where you're coming from, or to ask questions to any of the panelists throughout the hour and a half. We'll have a special moment at the end of the session to take the questions, but please feel free to ask any question you may have using the Q&A function. Feel free also to be active on social media using the Twitter handles of the OECD, but also UN Habitat and Cities Alliance. And I wish you all a great session today. And it's my pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Ulrik Knudsen, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD. DSG, you have the floor. Okay, Ulrik, can you hear us? I think the screen has frozen. We have lost the Deputy Secretary General. We'll wait a second or two. And then, meanwhile, I would suggest perhaps that you give it a go. Maimouna Sharif, Executive Director of UN Habitat, would you agree? Thank you very much, Maimouna, for this flexibility. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Aziza, Deputy Secretary General, OECD, Mr. Ulrik, Mr. Gert Knudsen, Director City Alliance, Dr. Greg Monroe, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Mayors, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. This is our new normal of doing things now. On behalf of UN Habitat, I wish to congratulate the National Urban Policy Program NUPP partners led by UN Habitat, OECD, and Cities Alliance for the production of the Global State of National Urban Policies 2021, Achieving Sustainable Development Goals and Delivering Climate Action Reports being launched today. UN Habitat contributed to the development of the report by mobilizing member states to provide update data on national urban policies. And since the first edition, Global State of the National Urban Policies in 2018, the series of reports has had significant impact on policymakers and practitioners by inspiring development and implementation of evidence-based, inclusive, and participatory national urban policies for sustainable urban development. So at UN Habitat, we believe urbanization is a catalyst for economic growth and social progress. Well-planned and managed urbanization ensures more efficient use of natural resources to advance climate change mitigation and adaptation. National urban policies provide the framework to harness the urbanization dividends and mitigate its negative externalities. So the national urban policies are key policy instruments to promote territorial and spatial equity, enhance policy coherence among different sectoral policies, and promote institutional coordination. So in addition, the national urban policy process provides a platform for the co-creation of a shared vision owned by all levels of governments, diverse social society groups, the private sector, and other relevant stakeholders. So the national urban policies are very crucial for achieving sustainable development goals and are at the heart of implementing the new urban agenda. So to us, to achieve cities and human settlements that are inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, countries need to develop national urban policies to effectively support the implementation and monitoring of the global agreement. The UN Habitat Strategic Plan 2020 to 2023 recognizes national urban policies together with urban planning, governance, and financing mechanism as key drivers of change towards achieving sustainable development. So UN Habitat is supporting urban policy at different levels through global program 4, regional programs. We have already 5 national urban policy programs and over 10 sub-national urban policy processes. So UN Habitat is currently supporting Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Sudan in Arab states, as well as Iran and Myanmar in Asia Pacific in formulation of their national urban policies. So technical support in diagnosis and formulation of state urban policies is also happening in Zanzibar, Tanzania, Niger State, Nigeria, in Africa, respectively. So the UN Habitat National Urban Policy or NUP database has consolidated information from over 156 countries and had further prepared 5 regional monitoring reports. So the database has been a useful source in development of Global State of National Urban Policies 2021 that we are launching today. So this report is a remarkable milestone in the global monitoring of national urban policies. So based on the analysis of rich data and knowledge from 162 countries, including 86 countries that participated in a comprehensive monitoring survey, the report showcases their progress in formulation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of national urban policies since 2018. So it showcases how countries use national urban policies to enhance sustainable urban development, advance global agendas, and address challenges revealed by the COVID-19 crisis. So the report also shows that national urban policies have matured since the first global monitoring in 2018, with more countries having explicit national urban policies and embracing wider objectives, including climate resilience, and more than 2/3 of countries reported that their national urban policies contribute to the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Agenda for Sustainable Development. So colleagues, to enhance their contribution to global and regional agendas, countries need to align new urban policies targets and indicators with the SDGs and other global indicators. They need to invest in robust urban scale data to help design policies that address place-based concerns, foster monitoring and evaluation, and facilitate evidence-based stakeholders dialogue throughout the formulation process. So the global urban monitoring framework being developed under the leadership of UN Habitat will offer a harmonized framework for collecting urban scale data to report on the SDGs and new urban agenda, and can provide important input for the future policies. So to effectively implement new urban policies and address emerging challenges, countries need to develop conducive constitutional and legislative frameworks, enhance fiscal transfers from central to local government, build their capacity and performance while also strengthening democracy and transparency in governance. UN Habitat is very proud to have worked with OECD, with City Alliance and other national urban policy program partners, as well as a diverse array of countries to produce this report. It provides strong recommendation for the national urban policies to be able to promote an inclusive, green, climate-friendly recovery of cities from COVID-19. Excellencies, ministers, mayors, and colleagues, I hope your discussion today will be fruitful and an inspiration for more countries to embark on developing, strengthening, implementing, and monitoring their own national urban policies. Thank you very much. Over to you, Aziza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maimouna Sharif, Executive Director of UN Habitat, and for the relentless commitment alongside Cities Alliance to enhance national urban policy across the world. And we now have the Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, Ulrich Knudsen. I understand you're back from your connection issue. I hope this will work. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Assisi, and sorry about that. I lost the connection 3 times within 20 minutes. It hasn't happened before. I will try not to rush through these important issues, and thank you also to Maimouna Sharif for stepping in before me. Director Greg Monroe as well, ministers, distinguished guests. It's really a pleasure to welcome you to this launch of the new report that we've called the Global State of National Urban Policy 2021, which is really the result, as Maimouna has already said, of a 2-year collaboration with UN Habitat, Cities Alliance, and many OECD member and partner countries. Now, this report aims to support governments in their efforts to shape cities that are fit for the future. It shows why, how, and where national urban policy can, so to speak, drive cities' recovery towards a new normal. Cities play a crucial role in our economies and societies. Most people work and live in cities, 48% now, which will grow to 55% by 2050. Cities are the engines of growth, opportunities, and well-being. In OECD countries, cities account for 2/3 of GDP and jobs, enjoying agglomeration benefits such as higher wages and productivity. However, cities are also places of inequality, with the structural, social, and environmental challenges amplified now by the COVID-19 crisis, from housing affordability to air pollution, traffic congestion, and spatial segregation. Mayors are key to getting our cities right, but they cannot do it alone. The OECD, UN Habitat, and Cities Alliance have long argued that responsibilities for many of the policy domains that matter for inclusive and sustainable growth are shared and have to be shared between national and local levels of government. This is why we need robust national urban policies on NUPs. The pandemic has amplified the need for integrated, coordinated, and multi-level urban policy. Many local leaders have been on the front line of short-term policy responses to the crisis. This has ranged from implementing distancing and confinement measures to supporting businesses and economic recovery, to ensuring that continuity of local public services and supporting vulnerable groups. These actions have shown the strength of our local governments, their agility, and their innovation. It's clear that there will be no sustainable recovery without active engagement of local and regional leaders, as well as businesses, large and small alike, and civil society. However, the pandemic has also revealed the important role that national governments can play through urban policy frameworks, especially if they provide better mechanisms for all levels of governments to work together. As our OECD report on city policy responses shows, many cities are also taking a longer-term perspective and using the crisis to become smarter, to become greener, and also to become more inclusive. This includes by digitalizing municipal services and by rethinking the way that cities work, in particular with respect to housing, teleworking, transportation, and not least remote education. COVID-19 is prompting 3 major paradigm shifts to rethink how to plan and manage our cities. And let me just go through each of them very briefly. First, the digital revolution, where intermediary cities have a big card to play. The accelerated experience with remote working and online services showed a strong potential for mid-sized cities.
I think you are frozen on my screen, Deputy Secretary General. Am I the only one? No, I see people nodding. Let's try to wait 3-5 seconds to see if we resume the connection with the DSG. That's bad luck today, or a digital divide. No, definitely. I think DSG, you are no longer connected with us. And with this, then I would suggest maybe that we keep the flexibility going on. Greg, if you wish to help me step in here, and I'll give the floor now to the leader of Cities Alliance, the third party co-producing this report today. Greg, thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you. Executive Director Maimouna Sharif, Deputy SG Ulrich Knudsen of the OECD, ministers, colleagues, guests, greetings. Like our partners UN Habitat and OECD, Cities Alliance has for the past few years actively supported the National Urban Policy Programme. As many of you know, the overarching objective is to develop a regular and systemic national urban policy monitoring framework at a global scale. The work of the NUPP is aligned with Cities Alliance's goal to support rapidly urbanizing cities, especially secondary cities, in fighting urban poverty and achieving sustainable development. Nearly 3/4 of the world's population live in these secondary cities, which are smaller and medium-sized cities. The number of people living in them is expected to at least double and maybe even triple in the next 15 to 25 years. As the rapid urbanization process continues, it becomes very critical for local and national governments to plan for this growth. NUPs will play a crucial role in that process through a deliberate government-led process of coordinating and rallying various actors for a common vision and goal that promote more transformative, productive, inclusive, and resilient urban development for the long term. For Cities Alliance, the urban poor are key components in that process. As already stated, NUPs are not only important in addressing challenges of rapid urbanization, but are also relevant in navigating the challenges caused by COVID-19 and in guiding cities through the recovery process and creating what will hopefully be a better and fairer and more inclusive new normal. The path to recovery from this unprecedented crisis calls for strong multi-level dialogue, for which NUPs will remain a key coordinating instrument, engaging policymakers, town planners, and city dwellers themselves. Over the past few years, significant improvements have taken place regarding the NUP design and implementation around the globe. These improvements and innovative practices include the integration of social and environmental objectives, evidence-based monitoring of NUP effectiveness and outcomes, and systematic mainstreaming of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement, and other global agendas. There are, however, still some challenges that countries experience in the formulation and implementation of NUPs, and these include coordination, lack of resources, and there are also significant capacity and data gaps in many countries. This is a start of much more effort on NUPs, and it is my pleasure to also welcome you all to this launch of the Global State of National Urban Policy Report, which is the start of a much longer journey for all of us. Today is also a unique opportunity to have senior government representatives from different regions and to learn and hear from their experiences in driving the NUP process in their respective countries, the challenges they have encountered, and how NUPs are transforming their cities. This is a journey that we will start today, not end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg Munro, Director of Cities Alliance, the third institution co-producing this global state of national urban policy. And now I go back to Ulrich Knudsen, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, to resume maybe with the first urban paradigm shift, DSG, if you agree, on teleworking and mid-sized cities that were also just mentioned by Greg. Actually, doesn't work. This is hard today. DSG, can you hear us? No. Then let's see, it took a good 5 seconds earlier. Maybe we're a bit lucky now. If not, then I would suggest that maybe we move to the presentation. Lamia, would you agree? and some of the messages conveyed by the Deputy Secretary General are also captured in the presentation. So this is maybe the moment to have a deep dive into the findings of the report. That's really my pleasure to introduce Lamia Kamal Shawi, Director of the OECD Center for SMEs, Entrepreneurship, Regions and Cities, where the work on cities and urban policy is located. And Lamia will take us through some of the findings of the report, which you can access more extensively online. The team has shared the link with you all, including to a 10-page summary policy highlight for those that want to get the detailed, can refer to the report. I see DSG, you're back. Should we give it a last chance, maybe? We're making your life difficult today, DSG. So while you're here, I hand over to you right now. No more transition. If you can resume with the first paradigm shift, please.
All right. Thanks a lot. I've actually tried to link up with my iPhone now instead, so I have a different connection. So maybe this is better. I think actually, ironically, I was interrupted when I talked about the importance of the digital revolution.
Absolutely.
and what intermediary cities have what kind of role they have to play. I am actually in an intermediary city right now, so maybe there really is a room for improvement. So I promise you, it was not something I had planned, but I will say now with even more force that the digital revolution has a big part to play, not least in intermediary cities. And the accelerated experience with remote working and online services has showed a very strong potential for mid-sized cities like the one I'm in to thrive and contribute to national growth, notably those located close to large metropolitan areas. The second paradigm shift is the ongoing shift from a logic of mobility to accessibility, which already affects how we design our cities, reclaim public space, regulate land use, and deliver public services. So with more demand for proximity to essential urban services and amenities by local and nature, NUPs will be essential to maintain territorial cohesion and ensure that cities remain connected to their surroundings through rural-urban linkages. Third and lastly, the pandemic has magnified the consequences of environmental degradation on health, resulting in greater citizen awareness. Clean air in cities is more important than ever, as exposure to air pollution and consequent decrease in immune response may increase the severity and case fatality of COVID-19. There is a unique momentum to tackle the climate change and the health crisis together, through bridging knowledge gaps and enhancing interministerial coordination to scale up climate action. National urban policies can help cities better connect urban and climate-related policies. So let me end, while I still am connected, to say that the OECD's long-standing experience with NUP led us to actively contribute to shaping the new urban agenda adopted in 2015 during the Habitat 3 conference. That was the moment when our three organizations joined forces by establishing the National Urban Policy Program to foster dialogue between local and national governments, share knowledge, and strengthen the evidence base. Looking ahead, let me express our continued commitment to support national urban policy through the OECD Regional Development Policy Committee and its Working Party on Urban Policy, which are leading international fora for discussion and exchange of experience in the field of national urban policy. Together, we must continue to foster our partnerships with the UN Habitat and Cities Alliance to manage the challenges and opportunities that lie in our cities, tapping into each other's fields of expertise, learning from new ideas, and sharing our knowledge and resources can collectively produce results. So I hope this report will guide governments in shaping better cities for better lives. Thank you very much. And back to you, Aziza, as quickly as possible before I lose it again.
Thank you so much, Ulrich Knudsen, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD. Thank you, Maimouna Sharif, Executive Director of UN Habitat. And thank you, Greg Munro, Director of Cities Alliance, for these opening remarks and for the amazing political support you've provided to this work over the past few years. And this is now a good moment to get into the substance of the report, and my pleasure to reintroduce Lamia Kamal-Shawi, Director of the OECD Centers for SMEs, Entrepreneurship, Regions and Cities, to take us through some of the messages. Lamia, you have a PowerPoint presentation. We'll let you share the screen. Thank you very much. And then we'll turn to the panel with our high-level guests and invitees.
Thank you so much, Aziza, Executive Director Maimouna Sharif, Director Monroe, dear DSG, dear Minister, dear colleagues. So I'm really delighted to present you the finding of this report. And as Aziza mentioned, I'm going to share now a screen. Here we are. And today is not easy, huh? Can you see it, Aziza?
Perfect. The diapo mode is coming.
Doesn't take the whole screen, does it?
Not yet. Let's click
Not
on
yet.
diapo.
I do.
At the bottom.
Okay. Let's do that for the
Maybe
moment until they
that way.
accept.
Sure.
Does it work?
Yeah, we see it well that way. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll go that way. So as you know, and as was mentioned, this report is a result of a 2-year collaboration between OECD, UN Habitat and Cities Alliance. And it expands on the first edition that was produced in 2018 and that we present at the World Urban Forum. So as the Deputy Secretary General just mentioned, COVID-19 has really disproportionately impacted cities, especially the large ones. They have paid a higher debt, economic and social toll, but we have also to remember that they were facing already a lot of challenges prior to COVID-19, challenges linked to some mega trends. For instance, you know, the question of rising inequalities, the question of digitalization and automation of work. There were many challenges ongoing, and we produced recently a report, Cities in the World, that looks at all types of cities and provide really new data on the perspective of global urbanization, highlighting this question of rising disparities that we were seeing in many cities and the concentration of population in metropolitan areas, the question of disparities in health, education, access to housing, access to digital infrastructure and other essential services. So these trends have of course different magnitude between countries and within countries, but they are prevalent in both the north and the south. So let me just show you now one example of pre-COVID challenges that impacting cities. Actually, this report has two focus on climate change and the question of integrated the vulnerable population. On climate change and environmental degradation here, for instance, you can see just one example, interesting data that show that average temperatures have increased in many cities around the world during the last 50 years. And actually since 1970, cooling needs, which is a measure for how long and by how much outside air temperature was above 22 degrees, have increased by almost 25% in OECD cities and even more double in cities like Athens. So this is something that we are now able to measure, and this is really important because this can support, you know, this can provide the evidence-based for policy action and for you know, providing a great rationale for a national actions to deal with all these issues. So again, COVID-19 has exacerbated pre-existing challenges, has brought new ones for cities that now will have to be addressed in the post-recovery strategy. And here again, national urban policy, the famous NUPs that we created the concept, we launched the concept together some years ago. Today, they need to play a central role in the recovery. So this report is really timely. It's going to help, we hope, all the countries that want to revisit their approach. And we all know that, you know, this concept is toward building, having more green, more inclusive, and more resilient cities. So now let me just show you some of the key findings. It's a very big fat report with a lot of information. Let me just show you some of the findings. And first, let me say a quick word about where the data come from and the analytical framework that we use. We have collected information on 160 countries worldwide. It's a lot. We cover all the planets, many geographic areas, and 26 of this country, they responded to a detailed survey. We were very impressed by the responses. We have elaborated 40 questions articulated around several themes that you can see on the screen. And some of these themes, which are here circled in gray, they were already there in our 2018 edition of the report. So here we were able to assess the progress made since then. And other, which are here highlighted in blue, are the new one that we wanted to focus on in this edition. As I mentioned, the question of climate change, the contribution to global agendas like the SDGs, and the focus on vulnerable population. And based on this information, we developed a framework, a new framework, and a typology that look at how countries define NUP, what outcomes governments expect from their NUP, the various form, stage, and thematic scope of NUP, the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation mechanism related to the NUP, and the institutional framework that support the NUP. So now let's look some of the findings of all this survey. First, on the main characteristic of NUP. Out of the 86 countries that responded to the survey, 58 of them reported having an explicit NUP, meaning a policy clearly entitled National Urban Policy, National Urbanization Policy, National Urban Strategy. And the chart on the screen shows the main characteristic of the NUP. And we can see that out of these 58 countries that responded to the questionnaire, a large majority have set up a common strategic vision for urban policy and development, actually 52 of them, and they use the NUP to coordinate urban matters across sectoral ministries. We always talk about the importance to coordinate action across ministries, but for urban policy makers, it's even more a challenge, though the NUP help to address this issue. And 44 out of the 58 countries with an explicit NUP use them to facilitate coordination across levels of government as well, not just horizontally, but vertically, and also to facilitate stakeholder engagement, a concept that has been growing and growing over the years. And in the report, we give a lot of country example, and one that comes immediately to my mind is, for instance, Germany, where the National Urban Development Policy enables collaboration across federal, state, and local government. And you will find many, many examples of countries specifically that illustrate everything that we are seeing here in the report. Now let's look at the progress countries have been made since our first monitoring report in 2018. Actually, 56% of the total 162 countries covered in the report now have an explicit NUP, and I already mentioned that, but this is a slight increase from 51%, the data that we had in 2018. And 62% of these countries reported that the NUPs are now operational. Here, I don't think there is much progress, as we had quite similar result in the previous monitoring, but one of the most interesting progress over the past 3 years is the growing interest and shift to better link climate and urban development policy. And as you can see, close to half of the 162 countries in the report have included climate objective in their national urban policy, which is really a nice improvement from the 32% in 2018. Now we have 48%. Another interesting findings that I'd like to highlight from the report is how the NUPs contribute to global agendas. And for instance, our monitoring shows that close to 70% of the 86 countries that responded to the survey say they use their NUP to achieve the SDGs. And interestingly, as you can see on the chart on the screen, these countries use their NUP not only to contribute to the SDG 11 that is strictly dedicated to cities, but also to other goals, the goal 6 on water or the goal 9 on infrastructure that matter really, really significantly for cities. And in Spain, for instance, the National Urban Agenda is one of the 10 key policy levers, including in the country's action plan on the SDGs, and it plays a big part to advance the 2030 agenda. In Costa Rica, another interesting example, the National Urban Policy sets out clear political orientation to achieve several targets of the SDGs. Another thing is that beyond the SDG, everybody's talking about the SDG, but there are also other important global agendas. And we have seen, for instance, that 54% of the country that responded to the survey also report using their NUPs to meet the objectives of the Paris Climate Agreement, and 34% for the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, which, as we know, is really important when it comes to urban matters. Zooming in on the Paris Climate Agreement, as I mentioned before, there has been a lot of progress made by countries to better integrate climate measures into their NUPs, to mainstream climate action into urban policy. And they do so, for instance, by incentivizing low carbon mobility, compact urban development, sustainable buildings, and risk sensitive land use policy. And this is the case in countries like Chile, like Colombia, Israel, and Portugal, and many others. The NUPs in these countries all include measures, for instance, to improve public transport and bicycle infrastructure in cities. So there is really a growing interest to connect urban with climate, but this is not at all an easy process for many countries. And the chart on the screen shows the main challenges countries face when it comes to integrate climate measures in their NUP. The data here that you have on the screen is for a sample of 67 countries that responded to the question. And we can see that the main difficulties actually relate essentially to the lack of expertise and knowledge on the links between climate change and urban policies. It also linked to the question of coordination between ministries and across levels of governments, and to the issue of insufficient resources, both human and financial. And I think the three institutions together, OECD, UN Habitat, and Cities Alliance, are really trying to work to fill the gap of knowledge to help countries addressing this type of issue. Our monitoring has shown also the progress countries have achieved when it comes to designing and developing their national urban policy. It has also shown that countries still struggle to implement their NUP effectively. Maimouna Sharif, she mentioned the importance of implementation, not designing, and this is a key issue for many countries. The charts on the screen show the persistent challenges countries report facing, which relate first and foremost to, again, a lack of resources, but also to the silos between policy portfolios. There is nothing new here. It was already the case in our previous monitoring, but there are reasons to be optimistic as we are seeing more countries taking measures to overcome these challenges. And to just give you one example, Chile has established the National Council for Urban Development to monitor the implementation of the National Urban Policy. The Council includes representatives of the central government, local authorities, the private sector, and the civil society. And to help break the silos, Chile recently established Regional Council for Urban Development to foster place-based urban policy. And again, in the report, you find a lot of examples that are really interesting for all the countries interested in knowing more about these issues. So these are just some of the findings, as I mentioned, and there are many more in the report. The publication concludes with 10 high-level recommendations for policymakers to help them design, implement a national urban policy that would support cities with the aim to addressing long-standing challenges, but also to adapt to the post-COVID world, because things have really changed. And these 10 recommendations, you can see them on the screen. They range from mobilizing various sources of finance to support the implementation of NUP, including, for instance, multi-level co-financing arrangements and public-private partnerships, to investing in robust urban scale data to better monitor and evaluate NUP. And of course, you can count on the OECD to work closely with countries to help them put this policy recommendation into action. At the OECD, we have been working on national urban policy for more than 15 years. We have supported many countries, Poland, Mexico, Chile, and China, now working with Colombia, Morocco, and Russia, and often in coordination and collaboration with UN Habitat and Cities Alliance. So we look forward to continue to do so. I'd like also to take the opportunity to thank our supporting partners of the National Urban Policy Program, ISOCAP, UCLG, and the Coalition for Urban Transition. I would like to thank all the countries who answered, participated to the survey, and I would like, please, to thank my team, Aziza Kmouch, but also Tadashi Matsumoto, who is leading this program in my department. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lamia Kamal-Shawi, Director of the OECD Center for SMEs, Entrepreneurship, Regions and Cities, for this teaser of the report. And I invite all of you to look at the actual report to know more and have a deep dive on each of the recommendations. We'll let you stop sharing the slides, Lamia, and that gives me the opportunity to tell the audience that we will be sharing the slides, the highlights, and the direct link to download the report for free, because a question was being asked on the chat on that at our earliest convenience after this meeting. And it's now my pleasure to turn to my colleague and friend, Shipra Narang Suri, who's the Chief of the Urban Practice Branch at UN Habitat, for the second part of the meeting. Shipra, I hope the technology helps you this time. We're 3 minutes late. It's not so bad, given the hurdles. You have the floor, Shipra, to introduce and moderate the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aziza. Thank you, Lamia, for that amazing presentation. How much work has gone into this report? It's phenomenal, really, and such a big moment for all of us today who've been working on this. So thank you. I hope the technology stays and we're able to have a dynamic discussion. Thank you to our three principals, DSG of OECD, the Director of Cities Alliance, and our Executive Director from UN Habitat, for reminding us of the importance of this tripartite partnership, the importance of this National Urban Policy Program, the role it plays in fostering dialogue between national and local governments, between partners, to share knowledge, to undertake peer-to-peer learning, and to strengthen the evidence base, which really this report has demonstrated in a very big way. And every report we've produced actually has taken the evidence base to a new level. And this one is certainly a leap ahead. We also just heard how national urban policies are critical for achieving sustainable development and advancing all the global agendas, not just the SDGs, but also the Paris Agreement, also the New Urban Agenda, also the Sendai Framework. And over 70% of the countries are recognizing the potential of national urban policies to pursue these global development agendas in an integrated fashion. Of course, the pandemic you can't even call it the elephant in the room anymore. It is the thing. It is the room, actually. And that really has revealed how national governments can define their policy frameworks for a better health response, for a better humanitarian response, and for a better recovery, inclusive as well as long-term. National urban policies are obviously becoming very crucial in the sense of ensuring a place-based and a people-centered recovery. So there we are. And we have a very, very dynamic, very exciting, very high-level panel with us. They are leaders who are driving national urban policies in their respective countries and in their organizations. We'll have time to interact with all of them, I hope. I already see questions flowing in the Q&A, so please keep them going, both to our first round of principles and to Lamia's presentation, as well as to the panel coming up. It's now my pleasure to introduce our panelists. We have with us, first of all, the Honorable Felipe Ward Edwards, who is the Minister of Housing and Urban Planning of Chile since June 2020. Lamia already made a reference to Chile, so we hope we'll hear some more details, some more insights from the Minister on the Chilean experience. We also have a video from the Minister of Housing and Cities of Colombia, Jonathan Malagon Gonzalez, and we will hear from him as well. Then we have Honorable Polita Wee, who's the Deputy Internal Affairs Minister for Urban Affairs of the Republic of Liberia, another shining example of our work on national urban policies, and we'll hear from her. We have Mr. Tilman Buchholz from Germany, who's the Deputy Head of the Urban Development Policy Unit at the German Federal Ministry of Interior, Buildings and Community. Welcome, Mr. Buchholz, and we look forward to hearing about the German experience as well. And finally, we have our good partners, UCLG, represented by Sarah Hoflisch, who's the Director of the Learning Team at United Cities and Local Governments, and a very important partner in taking this experience of national urban policies and making the links with local and regional governments. So without further ado, let me invite our first speaker, the Minister from Chile, Minister Edwards. Tell us a little bit about your vision on how Chile's national urban policy can shape building cities and recovery in the post-COVID world. You will have 5 minutes. Each of our speakers has 5 minutes. I will be a little rude. I hope connectivity stays, but if we keep to 5 minutes, then we can have an interactive discussion at the end. And I'm going to mute myself because of that phone. Thank you. Minister, over to you.
Thank you so much. Do you all hear me well? Well, along with thank you for the invitation to this important event, I would like to greet Mr. Ulrich Knudsen, Deputy Secretary General, OECD, Ms. Mahmouna Sharif, Executive Director, UN Habitat, Mr. Greg Monroe, Director, Cities Alliance, ministers and authorities, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by highlighting the importance of the Global State of National Urban Policy 2021 report, which provides valuable information on the progress of national urban policies worldwide and documents comparative experience implementing these policies. This is really fundamental when it comes to generating standards, gathering lessons, and learning good practices. Chile actively participated by collaborating with the researchers involved in the preparation of this report. We had the opportunity to share our experience providing relevant information on Chile's National Urban Development Policy and the National Urban Development Council as well. This is a specialized committee created to oversee the implementation of this policy, and it is compounded of advisors from the public and private sectors, including universities and think tanks. Regardless of the progress we have made as a country in urban matters in recent years, we are aware that we have significant challenges ahead. One of the most important is to address the housing and city deficit as indivisible elements. Also, to contribute to the economic reactivation from the generation of opportunities in our cities and rural areas. The National Urban Development Policy provides guidelines in this area, analyzed by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Planning and discussed within the National Urban Development Council in the last months. In fact, in 2019, we published the document City and Pandemic with specific proposals. The primary concept of this document is healthy cities, which is strongly supported by the idea of building cities based on 15-minute neighborhoods. We want the city to reach everyone equitably with access to housing, goods, and public services. The National Urban Development Policy has helped us reach an agreement on these and other major objectives. Today, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Planning is working on several tools to materialize this idea. I would like to highlight some of them. First, Cities 2050. Faced with today's urgent housing and urban planning needs, it's necessary to think about cities in the long term. This is why we have drawn up a roadmap for the next 30 years to develop integrated, inclusive, sustainable, and digital cities, focused on generating development opportunities for all those who live in them, fostering interaction and social cohesion. Another initiative is the Social and Territorial Integration Law. This bill, promoted by our ministry, is currently being discussed in Congress and aims to achieve greater social and urban integration in our cities, focusing on the most vulnerable families, and seeks to move towards fairer and more inclusive cities, providing tools to address the challenge of reducing the existing housing deficit and containing its growth. The project emphasizes the search for housing solutions in consolidated sectors of population centers and new urban areas, ensuring equitable access to urban public goods, avoiding the development of new situations of social segregation and reversing existing ones. The last initiative I would like to share is the 100+100 challenge. This public policy provides housing solutions to 100 slums this year, in addition to providing primary habitability to another 100 informal settlements. This plan will benefit 10,000 families living in slums and is intended to become a public policy that will allow the closure of 400 slums in the next 4 years. We believe in freedom, and we believe we must not block migration. However, we also believe that we must provide a secure environment and safe land to all people with full respect to private property and the promotion of sustainable urban growth. Finally, I would like to express that as a ministry, we highlight the importance of the National Urban Development Policy and our National Urban Development Council as tools that facilitate and guide decision-making to meet our challenges. Therefore, I would like to express Chile's commitment and collaboration with the OECD in order to strengthen urban policies in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Timed to the T, to 5 minutes. Wonderful. Thank you. And I noted the overarching focus on inclusivity, increasing inclusivity and reducing inequalities in everything that you said, in all your initiatives, whether it is the social and territorial integration law, whether it is the 100+100 or your 30-year roadmap. So phenomenal, really something to learn from. Thank you. And I do hope that you will get a lot of questions which will allow you to elaborate on some of these dimensions. Without further ado, let's move now to the video from the minister from Colombia, Jonathan Malagón González, who is also the president of the Forum of Ministers, which is the MINURBI and the Association of Ministers of Housing and Urban Planning in Latin America and the Caribbean. Please, colleagues, if you could play the video.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Jonathan Malagón. I'm the Minister of Housing and Cities of Colombia, and I really appreciate the invitation of the OECD, UN Habitat and Cities Alliance to participate in this release of the Global State of National Urban Policy 2021 report. In today's world, the commitment and outstanding job of organizations like this, which are leading the way towards the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the New Urban Agenda, is absolutely strategic and necessary. And I would also like to express my particular thanks to our moderator, Aziza Akmuch, for this invitation. It's truly an honor to be part of this event and to share this stage with Ulrich Vestegard, Maimuna Mosharif, and Greg Munro. along with the other fellow panelists. In Latin America, more than 20% of the urban population are living in slums nowadays. This means that more than 110 million people are suffering from overcrowding, deplorable housing conditions, and lack of access to quality services. Moreover, the economic and social effects of COVID-19 have been, I would say, catastrophic around the globe, and our region is not an exception at all. In fact, regional GDP in 2020 fell by 7 percentage points according to IMF, which also estimate that more than 20 million people entered poverty in the last year alone. From the very beginning of this pandemic, staying at home was the first line of defense against the virus, putting housing policy at the center of the public policy discussion. As we enter in this new chapter, looking to reactivate our economies, our housing and urban policy have yet again a key role to play worldwide. And while Latin America and the Caribbean is the most urbanized region in the world, we still face many challenges before we can capitalize on the opportunities ahead. First, capacity. Technical, financial, and human resources are required to handle your urban growth in Latin American cities. For instance, property tax collection in the region is 4 times less than the OECD average. Second, the sustainability. We lack green areas and clean mobility that promote a sustainable environment in the cities. As we all know, green areas are very important for leisure and recreation. However, Latin America only has 5 square meters of green areas per person, just the half of international benchmark, that is 10 square meters per person. Third, better urban and territorial planning. Large cities in the region have been characterized by a disorganized and informal growth. It's estimated that between 1990 and 2015, more than 35% of urban areas in Latin America were informal. And fourth, the optimal infrastructure. Urban boundaries and population density pose unique challenges for urban planners in our region. Our cities require creative solutions that improve the citizen life by providing more productive spaces and better mobility. For instance, cities such as Bogota, Ciudad de México, Rio de Janeiro, and Quito have deficient level of mobility that affect citizens every single day. And on average, a person can lose more than 140 hours a year due to traffic. In response to this reality, countries in Latin America and the Caribbean have already beginning to adopt national urban policy plans to face these challenges. And countries such as Chile, Argentina, Ecuador, Mexico, Bolivia, and of course Colombia, with our Ciudades 4.0 policy, are already well ahead, both structuring and implementing them. And certainly, in our purpose to advance and face the challenges and opportunity that the region has in housing and urban planning and urban settlements, this report that is released today will be a great tool, a very important input. Thanks. Thank you very much for your attention and for this opportunity to address you all. It has been a great pleasure for the Colombian government to be part of this discussion.
Fantastic. That was a very inspiring address by the minister from Colombia. And I think there's some common threads emerging as well from the 2 presentations from Latin America, the issue around housing. and addressing the very big question of housing through national urban policies is one big one. But I think generally national urban policies emerging as instruments to devise and implement creative solutions towards the challenges of capacity, towards the challenges of public space and housing, better planning, optimal infrastructure, all that was mentioned by the minister. And I particularly liked his great thanks at the end. It makes us all feel very good about what we're doing. Okay, let's move right along. And from Latin America, we move to Africa. And as I said, we have the Deputy Internal Affairs Minister from Liberia with us. Deputy Minister, if you can tell us a little bit from your context, Liberia has experienced a range of urban threats and opportunities. Over the past several years, you've had rapid urban growth, you've had preceding civil conflicts. How has this affected the national urban policy process in your country? Does the national urban policy take into account some of these dynamics? And how is it being aligned now to a much more forward-looking approach with the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, the New Urban Agenda, and the African 2063 agenda as well? Deputy Minister, you have the floor. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from my end. I'd like to say a very big thank you to all of you. Her Excellency, Madam Mamouna Sharif, Executive Director of UN Habitat, officials of government, our panelists, the supportive team, those that are following and watching, I'd like to say thank you. On behalf of His Excellency George Mane Weah, President of the Republic of Liberia, and in my own name as Deputy Minister for Urban Affairs and Chair on the Liberia Country Program, I would like to say a very big thank you to all of you for selecting me as one of your panelists amongst the many. It's an honor, we're grateful. I want to say a big thank you to the OECD for better policies, for better lives. We also want to say thank you to UN Habitat for better urban future, Cities Alliance, Cities with a Slum, UNUPs, United Nations Office for Project Services. It's an honor. We have been benefiting from the 162 countries around the world. Liberia is no exception, and we're very grateful in the national urban policy. What the national urban policy, there have been 5 phases that we've been working with in Liberia. The first phase was the feasibility that is already completed. The second phase is the diagnosis phase, which is already completed as well. And now we are on the formulation that will be starting anytime from now, very soon. We're hoping and praying, following all of the COVID measures in preventing it, wearing our nose mask, social distancing, and washing our hands. And then hopefully the implementation that will also start after, and then the monitoring and evaluation. Each step of the process involves research through community engagement, through dialogue, consultation on the demographic areas, and also with government officials from different lines, ministries, and agencies. For example, we have the Ministry of Public Works that we work along with on urban development plannings, both in rural and urban areas. We also work with the Environmental Protection Agency, and then we work with the Liberia Water and Sewer Corporation, because all of these agencies have to do with urban planning. So we work along with them from Liberia perspective. We also work with people with disabilities. We work with the slum communities, dwellers, and then other civil society institutions. We want to make sure that it's very inclusive, participatory, leaving no one behind, respecting all of our people's views and opinions, and learning from one another. And so far, it has been a very tremendous efforts we've made. The National Diagnosis Study undertook an analysis of urbanization trends to assist in their identification and prioritization of issues and challenges to be addressed in the NUP. The diagnosis phase of the NUP began in 2018 and includes the conveying of 1 national and 2 regional consultative workshops with corresponding reports that have been sent to you. So the Liberian settlements are urbanizing at a very fast rate. Like the United Nations projections show that by 2050, Liberia population will almost triple to 6.7 million. So 68.2% of which will reside in urban areas. Between 2010 and 2020, urban population has grown from 1.9 million to 2.6 million, making basic social services a high demand in our country. Our cities across the 15 counties are overpopulated. And from recent SWOT analysis, the municipalities have been going through series of challenges that they've been faced with. One, we all know that Liberia fought a civil war that affected all of our spatial planning, all of our strategic planning, our road connectivity, infrastructure development were destroyed at that time. So it become a serious challenge for us. We also, another challenge we face with is revenue collection. The purchasing power is not there yet, and we're still making efforts. Some places, logistics are issues like vehicles, tricycles, trucks, fuel to get all of these things across the country has been an issue for us. But we also want to applaud our government for listening to us, for listening to our public to making all of the efforts. We want to thank our president that the act was signed in 2018, and that was to strengthen the local government, to develop a proper agenda for development and prosperity that has been helping with our country. So today we have, through the proper agenda for development, a lot of road connectivity is going on, housing infrastructure is being built, improved healthcare, education, quality education has been given across the country. And then we continue to work with the international partners on making our urban policy a better one. So supporting the non-recovery strategies for green, safe, smart, and resilient cities, Liberia has developed a tool for the implementation of the new urban agenda, which is the SDGs, especially targeting goals. Policy themes are urban legislation, including also the land governance, social economic development, municipal finance, decentralization, environment resilience, and climate change. So we know that all of these things are not going to be so easy, but holistically, leaving no one behind collectively, we always engage through workshops, through training, through capacity building. And then with these meetings, everyone can come on board and give us idea how we can make Liberia better in supporting the national urban policy. So again, we are prioritizing capacity building. We are prioritizing inclusive governance and participatory. We are also prioritizing information dissemination, because when the people are not informed, they don't know what to do. So we are also prioritizing information dissemination and strategic planning across the country. So most times we have all of these meetings, Zooming, talking with everybody and respecting everybody's view. So again, I want to take this time to say thank you for your audience and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and also for reminding us that the national urban policy process, or any policy making process, has multiple dimensions. There is the dimension of advocacy. There is the dimension of bringing people together. There is the element of consultation and inclusive participation, as you rightly mentioned, which is absolutely fundamental, and making sure that you're responding to the concerns of the most vulnerable and those most in danger of being left behind. Also for reminding us that these policies are not only an instrument for sustainable physical development, but also for building social cohesion and long-term recovery in a post-conflict environment such as Liberia. So thank you again, and congratulations on your great work on national policy.
Thank you.
Now let me turn to Mr. Tilman Buchholz for the German experience. Mr. Buchholz, Germany took strong leadership in the development of the new Leipzig Charter, which of course we are all very much appreciative of, which guides Europe's sustainable urban development for many years to come. Can you tell us a little bit about how Germany is advocating for national urban development policies and how these policies can help in advancing the implementation of the Leipzig Charter?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shipra. Greetings from Berlin, dear ministers, vice minister, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues across the globe. We thank you very much for inviting us to this panel. We very much appreciate this debate on national urban policies because we think that these policies are key to push integrated urban development strategies in general. And they're also important element to translate major urban development documents like the New Leipzig Charter, but also the SDGs, for instance, or the New Urban Agenda into practice on the ground. And thank you very much really for this very impressive and informative report on national urban policies. And well, you are right, Germany was very committed to the establishment of the New Leipzig Charter. And I would like to give you a short outline about this charter. It's a strategic reference document on the transformative power of cities that was adopted at an informal ministerial under German EU Council presidency last year. And it's a European document that was developed in a very inclusive process that lasted more than 2 years with all member states, European institutions, organizations, but also including OECD and UN Habitat. And this charter contains some basic principles, visions of good urban governance, like urban policy for the common good, the integrated approach, participation and co-creation, and others. And at the same time, the Charter also highlights 3 dimensions: the just city, the green city, and the productive cities. And all these dimensions are key to the transformation of cities towards sustainability and a higher quality of life for all in our cities. The Charter emphasizes that cities need support from the national level via national urban policies to implement these principles. We in Germany have established our national urban development policy already in 2007 as a response to the original Leipzig Charter, so to say, that had been adopted in 2007 as a predecessor of this new Leipzig Charter. And already the Leipzig Charter 2007 sent this very strong message to establish national urban policies. And our national urban policy is a joint initiative of all relevant governance levels. It's a national level, so the federal government. It's a regional level. You know, that's about, you have this federal system in Germany with great competences on the regional level, and for sure also the local level. So it addresses all aspects of national urban policy frameworks that are also mentioned in the New Leipzig Charter. It's a platform for dialogue. It's about exchange of experience. It promotes integrated urban development via funding schemes, and it provides space and opportunity for innovation and experimentation. And we are convinced that there is a need for strong national urban policies. National or urban policy should be rooted also at the national scale, although there might be limited to formal competences for urban development on that level, which is the case for Germany. But in the meantime, our national urban policy really has gained a high reputation among urban stakeholders, and it is, we understand it as a main vehicle to implement the principles of the New Leipzig Charter. And to sum it up, we see 3 main success factors for national urban policy. It's governance, it is funding, and it is innovation. So these are the main ingredients of our informal and inclusive initiative on national urban policy in Germany. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And my alarm didn't even go. My goodness, the panelists are really keeping to time today. Thank you very much, Mr. Buchholz. And I liked your last 3 points: the implementation, the success criteria, the success factors for national urban policy: governance, funding, and innovation. I think we'll take that with us into the discussion. Speaking of the discussion, colleagues, there is a lot of conversation in the Q&A. There are a lot of questions coming in around climate change, around participation, around slums and informal settlements. So please do log into the Q&A and respond to those as you can, and we'll pick up some at the end as well. Okay, last but absolutely not the least, let me now turn to United Cities and Local Governments, Sarah Auflisch. Sarah, we've heard from 4 national leaders, their perspectives around the national urban policy. The report that we're launching today reconfirms that engaging subnational governments and local governments is a key success factor for national urban policies, as Mr. Buchholz has also just said. So can you share with us some views on the findings of the report from a local government perspective, and some areas, some suggestions where you think national urban policies in terms of process, in terms of content, or in terms of outcome can be improved from a local government perspective? Sarah.
Thank you very much, Shipra. And it's an honor for me, for UCLG, to be here with us. Of course, this work of UN Habitat, OECD, Cities Alliance on National Urban Policy is crucial for us. It's crucial for our members, not only because it deals urban, because also there's so much said about the role of local and regional governments, which is what we stand for at UCLG, the World Association for Local Governments. I think the report shows that we are now not only we recognize that we are an urban world, we also deal with an urban world. So the urban world needs to be managed, needs to be funded, policies needs to be developed, and the magnificent work, a lot of response, I think the detail also Lamia has provided, it is really inspiring, and we will of course contribute whenever we can, not only in the analysis, also in the way ahead, because I think this is a report, it's an overview, it's a snapshot. We have contributed to chapter 4 in particular, but there we have seen that the National Urban Policy Agenda is unfortunately not so well known in all local and regional governments. So we have to see that this is sometimes a risk, that it just passed as some national affair, a national definition, a national design, and later local government might look if there's any funding window opportunity coming out. So there's a lot to do for us. So I think the first piece would be to link the national urban policy to the subnational urban policy. We have been working with Remy's team on a guide for this. And local governments are policymakers, so they are not stakeholders, they are actors, if not shareholders, to say in another way. But they are not just a stakeholder because they hold power, they are government, they also develop policies. And this is very nice to listen when, for example, the Paris development of 15-minute cities is sounding in Chile and is inspiring the Chilean policies. It is incredible to listen that in Liberia, the national urban policies has a decentralization as a key piece to work at. And of course, in Germany, I think the system is that high that even now the commitment is we need to commit again to urban. We need to go and hold for urban. So this is very good, and I would like to give you an example. In this morning, I was in Yakutsk, virtually, of course. Yakutsk is in Siberia, and it is a city that I think it's incredible how the climate change is affecting Siberia, and the permafrost and glacier melting is the big agenda. So if we look to their experience in Yakutsk, the ceiling and the limit of the local climate policy making is the planet. It is the climate, and they want to avoid the shortfall of fresh water, not only for their own future generations, but also for the Asian cities. So the limit of the local policy making cannot be the bureaucracy and the financial window. On the contrary, and I think in Russia this is happening currently on the example of Yakutsk. The Russian government listens and learns from these examples, maps it, puts academic resources, and the national policy is inspired by this local way forward, because as we have seen in many cities in COVID, and I think you all have acknowledged the role of cities, the innovation that has come up in the COVID response by the cities, that cities cannot wait. And with the climate change, it is the same. The cities cannot wait. They will need to give responses, and the nations have to support them. So the main point, of course, in our view is, if we look in the national urban policy, that we look at in a cycle, and if we learn from the implementation, which is in the end what counts and what matters, we can see, I think Ulrich made that points very well, ownership, I would add to the governance and to the funding, because ownership can be improved. And I think everybody has also talked about it. The report shows it very clear. We need more ownership of more stakeholders, and the localizing SDG process we have been pushing for with the United Nations has been an important example, and we should not miss this and involve local governments since the beginning in the design. Because if not, we don't have neither SDG, we don't have Sendai, we don't have a climate agreement. I mean, in the end, I think it has been said very often, the role is clear. So what would be the way forward and the need? The capacity building, I think, is a crucial agenda. And here, of course, we have a very important report, but this report informs us that it is urgent to do something. In particular, if we relate it to climate change, we learned from our emergency in COVID now that climate change is the next one, just slower. And the building in capacity in regional and local governments to formulate policy, to coordinate, to gather data, to improve their financial capacity, not only to raise it, but also to manage it and to inform the sources in national and supranational governments, and also to build capacity in the national government. I think this is also very important, because we need to build the capacity in national government to work together, to listen to cities, to be able to, like we saw now in Chile, when you get the opportunity, so to understand, to listen, and in particular, the integrated development. I think this was very clear in Germany as well. The integrated development is clearly a task the cities know better and can inform, and this can be learned in the national agenda. So this would be my points. And I think another for the climate change, which is also part of the title, it is equally important as the COVID agenda. It is just tomorrow that we look into it. So the impetus we have been gathering during this emergency of COVID, let's keep it and go for climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for making that clear point. Cities are at the front line. They have to respond. National governments have to support them, and national urban policies can be that instrument to facilitate that engagement and their support, provided there is ownership from the beginning of this national urban policy process. Very, very important. And also for emphasizing the points around climate change and climate action. Thank you again. We have a few minutes. We're a few minutes behind time. So I'm going to pick 2 or 3 questions from the chat and throw them at our panelists and give them a minute or so to respond. I think there was one question around implementation, around innovative financing mechanisms for national urban policies. That's, of course, always the big question, isn't it? You can have a great policy, but how do you finance its implementation? How do you ensure its implementation? So perhaps a minute on this to Chile, to the minister from Chile, on how do you think, what are the innovative mechanisms that you're seeing and applying on financing and implementation of the National Urban Policy? And then I'll come to a couple of other questions to our other panelists as well. Minister, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, this is why we created this new policy, Cities 2050. We really needed a strategy. We really need a vision. And this is why we think it's really urgent to work on urban planning needs. So I agree absolutely with what has been said regarding the necessity of coordination, new legislation. This is why, as I said, we are working on this bill in order to have social integration. This is why we need to work on infrastructure. I think legislation, infrastructure, coordination, and budget. Of course, that's really important. And we didn't have this in Chile. And this is why we are generating this strategy, this City 2050, in order to work on the territorial planning tools. This is really important to us. Maybe in another time, we would like to share with you this project, Cities 2050. It's really interesting. We are, of course, trying to have here in Chile the good examples that has been successful in other countries. So we would like to share that project with you. And I think collaboration, budget, infrastructure, and of course, thinking in the long term. This can't be just politics. This has to be public policy, and that's the difference. This is the soul, I would like to say, of this project. I would like to share with you maybe another time, Cities 2050.
Thank you very much. A long-term view, not politics, but long-term policy. Thank you for reflecting on that. There is a direct question for the Deputy Minister from Liberia in the chat. It's interesting to learn that you have sought to engage diverse voices in the National Urban Policy process, particularly engaging persons with disabilities. Can you quickly tell us in a minute how you have done that and brought in many different voices into your process?
Oh, thank you. First of all, we realize that no man is an island. We depend on one another to move forward. And so the first thing we try to do is to have an inclusive participatory where everybody is involved. So you have people from the disabled group, you have people from slum communities, you have people from the market, you have people from the women groups, youth groups, and different groups. And then we all come to these workshops where we can learn from one another. So there are views people we gave on some recommendation, and that's how we use it to make progress.
Fantastic. Sorry, I thought I was already unmuted. Great, thank you. And lots to learn from in the Liberia process, certainly. Okay, I'm going to actually wrap up because I think we are a few minutes behind time. But before I hand back to Aziza, perhaps also alerting Rene that there was a question on slums and housing, and he could perhaps look at it in his closing remarks as well. Back to you, Aziza, and thank you to all the panelists for their remarkable insight.
Thank you so much, Shipra, for the seamless moderation, and to all the panelists for the great energy, enthusiasm, and for being sharp and to the point, remarkable inputs. And we can see indeed there is an urban community that is striving to make things happen. Let me now turn to René Ohman, Head of Program at Cities Alliance, to share some of his insights on the ways forward. If you bear with us an extra 4 or 5 minutes, we're slightly delayed, but we'll try not to run over too much. René, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Aziza. I don't need 5 minutes. Distinguished panelists and partners, on behalf of the Focal Points team within the coordinating group between UN Habitat, OECD, and the Cities Alliance Secretariat, I'm happy to share some key priorities and next steps in our joint National Urban Policy Program. As Shipra succinctly outlined, and I need to apologize that the subject of housing cannot be wrapped up in 2 minutes, but I'm Happy to share some indications when we're going to have a deep dive on it. Our panelists and discussions today have underscored again, I think, why national urban policies are timely and I would say necessary policy initiatives to respond to our current and very interwoven inequality and resilience crises in cities, for which not only, as Sarah said, intra, but also intergovernmental engagements and global partnerships such as those need to be strengthened. Through this program, we would like to continue contributing to this endeavor by at least 2 ways in the upcoming months. In the first instance, we would like to invite our partners championing the application, analysis, and policy device on national urban policies to join our forthcoming partners meeting to be organized in fall this year. At this meeting, we would like to invite for a deep dive into the analysis of the report that we launched today. You could also think of housing as it was a common thread, and informal settlements is another. Collect ideas and updates from our partners and hopefully craft new initiatives. At this point in time, I think it's due to acknowledge that we are very grateful that already around 17 national governments and 12 international organizations have already engaged with us on the National Urban Policies Program. We would cordially invite and encourage others to follow them and join us. Secondly, we will use the following months to consider how the program and our partners group can leverage key events in this and the next year to further promote the exchange on and commitment to national urban policies as a policy lever, as we've heard, for various global agendas, but not at least for the implementing Agenda 2030 and the new urban agenda. Key events so far identified are, of course, the OECD Regional Development Policy Committee and its Working Party on Urban Policy taking place end of November. There is AfriCities, organized by United Cities and Local Governments of Africa, UCAGA, currently scheduled for April 22 in Kisumu, Kenya, focusing on the role of intermediary cities, also a subject that have been today at various points highlighted. But last but not least, next year, the 11th World Urban Forum, convened by UN Habitat with the government of Poland and the city of Katowice in June 22. If you see other events and opportunities that could be leveraged, please contact us, any of us, in the Focal Points team. We do hope that our National Urban Policy Program can use these moments to advocate for the advancement of national urban policies, and we are looking forward to seeing you, and we all hope in person. Aziza, back to you.
Thank you very much, René. And this takes us to the end of this webinar and gives me the opportunity to say 3 things. The first one is that you will have access online by the end of the day to the policy highlights, the report per se. We'll put the recording of the webinar and the PowerPoint presentation. We'll make sure we send an email to the 500 plus stakeholders that had registered for this webinar. We had over a half for the past hour and a half online, and feel free to disseminate and spread the good words for this work to trickle down in better urban policies. The second point is to say that the NUP week is not stopping here. This was actually the kickoff. We have a series of policy labs that we are organizing as of Monday with EU-KN. You have the links that the team is going to put online. There will be sessions on national urban policies and productivity, on inclusion, on environmental sustainability, and the just transition. So we can only invite those of you that want to know more about specifics of NUPs in different countries to join us in the first 3 days next week. And last but not least, a huge thanks to all of you online, to all the guests and panelists and ministers and stakeholders online, to our dream team from Habitat, Shipra and Remy and all your colleagues, but also from Cities Alliance, René, and of course, Tadashi Matsumoto in my team, the architect from the OECD's end of this global monitoring. It's been really a big journey, a race, a sprint until early this morning. I think we can be very proud and make sure that we now make a big splash from a communication standpoint. Thank you also to all the colleagues that have supported with the logistics and make this a very fluid 1.5 hour webinar. Lucy, Claudia, Liv, and many others that have worked very hard on the communication. Thank you all. Really take good care of yourselves. We hope at some point we'll raise a glass somewhere in presence, if not at the World Urban Forum, then before. And meanwhile, let's keep the good work. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aziza.
Thank you, Shipra. Bye-bye.
Bye.